For centuries, science has tried to reduce us to machines, nerves as wires, reflexes as switches, perception as a camera snapping reality. In Merleau-Ponty's reimagining, the body isn't a passive object to dissect, it's the living dialect between habit and reinvention, between what we've lost and what we can't let go. In this chapter, The Body as Object and Mechanistic Physiology, Merleau-Ponty confronts the paradox at the heart of human existence. How can our bodies simultaneously anchor us to the past and propel us into the future? To answer this, we'll explore the following topics: perception as actively embodied, the implications of the phantom limb, the dialectic between habitual body and present body, and finally, an embodied conception of the psychoanalytic conception of repression. Merleau-Ponty begins this chapter by challenging the traditional mechanistic view of the body as a passive object governed by linear cause and effect relationships. Classical physiology, he argues, tried to reduce bodily functions to mere mechanical reactions, like stimuli triggering predetermined neural responses, as if the body were a collection of parts, like gears in a machine. This framework treated perception as a straightforward translation of external stimuli into internal sensations, relying on theories like specific nerve energy that attributed distinct sensory qualities, sight, touch, to isolated organs or neural pathways. Modern research, however, reveals a more dynamic picture. The body isn't a neutral transmitter, but an agent that meets stimuli through its own anticipatory patterns. Merleau-Ponty likens this to how a hand exploring an object prefigures its shape through movement, actively shaping what is perceived rather than merely passively recording it. However, could not this active and dynamic interpretation of embodied perception still be understood within the mechanistic paradigm? Even if the body shapes sensory input, isn't it still fundamentally a machine governed by fixed neural pathways? Merleau-Ponty rejects such an interpretation, and to support his position, he points to three cases. In one case, we have two insects, one with a leg cut off, the other with a leg tied and restricted from movement. The insect who loses a leg adapts instantly, substituting a sound limb without hesitation. The other one, with leg tied, does not compensate. Now, why is this? According to Merleau-Ponty, the answer has nothing to do with mechanistic physiology, but instead with the embodied and tacitly meaningful existence of the insect's being in the world. For the insect with leg tied, the leg remains a manifest possibility of movement within that insect's world. Its presence does not allow the insect to forego those possibilities, thereby preventing it from adjusting to its conditions in the manner that we see the insect who lost its leg can do. That insect with the missing leg, by contrast, has had the meaning of its embodied being changed, and thus can readily adapt with the new set of possibilities now at its disposal, thus being readily able to substitute another limb without hesitation. For Merleau-Ponty, this example demonstrates a primordial meaning that defines an organism's being in the world, one that precedes physiological mechanisms. Reflexes are a second case discussed. Now, ordinarily, reflexes are conceived of as blind robotic responses. However, for Merleau-Ponty, reflexes are a pre-reflective grasp of what matters, revealing how the body structures experiences and how it is oriented toward the world well before mental calculation and conscious determination. A hand jerking from heat isn't just reacting to a stimuli. It's responding to the meaning of danger. The reflex, in a certain sense, knows the situation globally. The third case concerns the phantom limb, where an individual continues to feel the ongoing presence of a limb that is no longer there due to injury. Traditional theories have attempted to reduce this phenomenon to either a purely physiological or purely psychological explanation. On one side, physiologists point to misfiring neurons or residual nerve signals from the stump. On the other, psychologists frame the phantom as a denial of loss, a mind clinging to the past. However, for Merleau-Ponty, these theories fall short. For severing sensory pathways leading to the brain or the use of anesthetics erases the phantom sensation, thereby proving physiology matters, while emotional trauma or acceptance can evoke the sensation or dissolve it, thereby showing how psychology matters. And for instance, in another example of psychology, mirror therapy is considered a legitimate treatment for phantom limb pain that uses visual feedback to trick the brain and thereby reduce pain from the phantom limb. In the end, the phantom limb defies simple categorization, being neither a neural error nor a psychological quirk. It's a vivid expression of the body's irreducible role as the medium through which we inhabit space and time. Take the soldier who still feels shrapnel and a missing arm, frozen in the position it occupied at the moment of injury. The phantom lingers as a trace of that embodied lived history, resisting erasure even after physical loss. It's the body's habitual persistence, a missing leg still felt, not as a memory, but as just with the insect with leg tied, a remaining latent possibility. Like Proust sensing his grandmother's presence beyond death, the amputee relies on the phantom as a vague reserve of movement, even if it falters in practice. The phantom isn't a representation of the limb, but a mode of being in the world, a way the body continues to allow for its lost parts, much like we navigate a dark room with the confidence of familiar space, even when sight fails. Similarly, anosognosia, a condition involving the denial of loss or injury, reveals the body's struggle to reconcile its past and present. A patient might insist that their paralyzed hand is a cold snake, neither fully acknowledging nor ignoring its existence. This isn't a sensory malfunction, but a fractured awareness, where the body's habitual self-image clashes with its new reality, like avoiding a room where a loved one's absence aches the heart. The paralyzed limb isn't forgotten, it's excluded from the body's active schema, and yet its shadow continues to linger. Merleau-Ponty argues that phantom limbs and anosognosia expose the error in splitting the body from consciousness. The body isn't a machine with interchangeable parts, but a unified field of meaning. The phantom emerges where physiology and lived experience intersect, and the injury disrupts the body's intentional dialogue with the world, leaving a void that the habitual body strives to fill. The phantom limb occupies a middle ground where the body's lived history collides with its present, neither fully present nor absent, but ambivalent, like the echo of a habit that outlasts its utility. Merleau-Ponty anchors this in the concept of being in the world. The body isn't a collection of parts or a theater for mental acts, but a horizon, a tacit background against which experience unfolds. The phantom limb demonstrates how this horizon persists, even when it's become fragmented. As such, Merleau-Ponty identifies two intertwined layers of the body. First, there is the habitual body, consisting of the body's biological rhythms, heartbeats, reflexes, as well as a repository of skills and histories, typing, dancing, loving, that persist even when limbs vanish. Beneath our personal dramas are this anonymous stratum, a pre-personal ground that sustains us in context whereby we are acting through a second layer of the body, the present body, whereby we choose, act, and respond to the ongoing demands of the present world. In the end, the body isn't a machine to fix or a mind to persuade. It's a living contradiction, a horizon where past and present, hope and limitation collide. To lose a limb is not to lose a part, but to confront the abyss where being meets the world. To be in the world is to trust it as a partner, even when it betrays us. The phantom limb, the avoided paralysis, they're not errors, but proof of the body's irreducible role as the orchestrator of meaning. Toward the end of this chapter, Merleau-Ponty turns to the psychoanalytic concept of repression. Repression for Merleau-Ponty isn't a mental act, but an embodied arrest. Like a song stuck on repeat, repression traps us in frozen time, a moment that refuses to fade, its weight distorting all that follows, like a lover who can't move past a betrayal, their heart tethered to a wound that outlives its cause. This isn't mere memory, but a way of being, a ghostly present that haunts every new breath. The repressed past continuously seeps into one's present. This tension between frozen trauma and ongoing flowing time exposes the body as both freedom and prison. When reality becomes too stark, a missing limb, a shattered dream, the body retreats into a self-contained realm. The phantom limb, like repressed grief, isn't a lie, but a compromise. The world is erased just enough to sustain the body's habitual thrust. A painter who loses a hand might still feel the brush, not out of delusion, but because their identity, their being a painter, refuses complete dissolution. The phantom isn't a failure to accept loss, but a testament to how deeply the body is in its projects. And so in this chapter, Merleau-Ponty reimagines repression not as a psychic defense mechanism, but as an embodied negotiation between the body's habitual structures and the world's destabilizing forces. Drawing on yet diverging from Freudian theory, he argues repression is less about banishing memories to a hidden mental vault than about the body's existential refusal to relinquish its anchoring projects. For Merleau-Ponty, repression is a form of temporal paralysis where the lived body resists the disintegration of its identity by freezing a traumatic moment into a haunting present. Unlike Freud's libidinal unconscious, Merleau-Ponty's unconscious is not a submerged psychic layer, but the silent horizon of pre-reflective habits that structure perception itself. When trauma shatters the intentional arc, the body's seamless integration of past, present, and future, the habitual body retreats into a self-contained realm, suspending time to preserve the self's fragile unity. And so we arrive at the heart of Merleau-Ponty's thought here. Existence is like a river, carving its path through time. And this river is not just a flow of moments, but the very banks that shape it. A paradox where we are both carried by currents while also sculpting the terrain. To be human is to wade in these waters, anchored by the weight of our past, yet reaching toward horizons we can never fully grasp. The phantom limb, aching for what's lost, and the echo of memories we can't outrun. These are not flaws, but testaments. They remind us that we are bridges between what was and what might be. And so gone are the sterile divides between mind versus body, self versus world. Instead, he offers an embodied intentionality, a dance where biology and meaning intertwine. Unlike animals bound to instincts, we dwell in a world always already interpreted. But this freedom demands a pact. To transcend our environment, we first root ourselves in it. Our habits, the muscle memory of a dancer, the reflex of a breath, are not chains, but the soil from which creativity grows and freedom is expressed. And this is where Merleau-Ponty diverges from Descartes' dualism, as well as Sartre's divide between the inert in itself and the ecstatic for itself. Merleau-Ponty writes, "What allows us to link to each other the physiological and the psychic is the fact that when reintegrated into existence, they are no longer distinguishable, respectively as the order of the in itself and that of the for itself, and that they are both directed towards an intentional pole or towards a world. In this light, the lived body, that intertwining of the in itself and the for itself, emerges as philosophy's missing link, the hyphen connecting self and world, visible and invisible." Hey, I'm glad you made it to the end. If you found this video helpful and want to support this work, several ways you can do that: liking the video, sharing it with others, and if you haven't already, subscribing to the channel. You can also support this work through the Super Thanks button below here on YouTube. And you can also become a Patreon supporter, where I offer video transcripts, unedited materials, these diagrams that I use during these videos, and prioritize questions and comments here on YouTube. The link is below. I would like to thank the following for already supporting this work over on Patreon. So it happened. We got to 10,000 subscribers. It's exciting. It's a psychological milestone that is rewarding, because it came through a lot of years of hard work and not trying to compromise on what I'm trying to do here, which is provide rigorous analyses of difficult philosophy texts in such a way that I make those texts more approachable without removing the need for having to read the text yourselves. And I'm a big believer in that, and will continue to approach these videos with that mindset. And so until next time, be well.